1, 2, sound check. This is a sound check. Check. Can you hear? Can you hear us? Okay. Sound test 2, sound test 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6. Good.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs les représentants de la presse et des médias. The World Meteorological Organization is releasing today the State of the Global Climate 2022. This report shows the status of the key climate indicators like greenhouse gases, temperatures, sea level rise, ocean heat and acidification, sea ice and glaciers. It also highlights the impacts of climate change and extreme weather. But there will be also a couple of good news. Today we have with us Professor Petteri Taalas, the Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization, who will be presenting the context and the findings of this report. Professor Taalas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Brigitte, and welcome also on my behalf. And as you know, we are the host agency of IPCC, and IPCC just published its summary for policymakers report, the last bit of the sixth assessment report series. And besides that, WMO is publishing annual status of climate report, which is demonstrating where we are with the climate change and disasters. And in this report that we are publishing today, we have shown what's happening to the key climate parameters. We have again broken records in the main greenhouse gas concentrations, carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide, and last year we saw the biggest annual increase of methane concentration. So far we have seen 1.15 degrees warming since 1850 to 900, and we have seen a cooling effect of Pacific Ocean temperatures because of La Nina, and that's why we haven't broken globally the all-time high. But once we go to the next El Niño, which is likely to happen during the latter part of this year and next year, we may be fairly close to to the Paris 1.5 degrees low limit, at least on temporary basis. But we have broken several regional records. For example, United Kingdom was measuring 40 degrees last summer, their all-time high, and also in Sweden they reached their record so far, 37.2 degrees. And there were also some local records broken in Ireland and Germany. We have stored more than 90% of the excess heat that we have brought to the planet to ocean, and we have again broken a new record in ocean heat content, which is, for example, giving more energy for the tropical storms, cyclones, hurricanes, and typhoons. We have doubled the sea level rise during the past 20 years. We used to have 2.3 millimeters per year sea level rise 20 years ago, and recently we have seen 4.6 millimeters per year increases. And that increase is very much coming from the melting of major glaciers in Greenland and Antarctica. Oceans serve as a sink of carbon dioxide, and we have again reached a new record of the acidity of ocean seawater, and that's affecting negatively corals, shells, and plankton as examples. We have seen a new record low of Antarctic sea ice last February, and this is a new feature. So far we have been breaking these records in the Arctic only, but also the Antarctic sea ice has started shrinking. Melting of the glaciers continue, and there has been a 4-time increase of the melting of glaciers since the 70s. And here in Switzerland, we lost 6.2% of the glacier mass last summer because of the heat wave, which is a new record. We have seen plenty of extreme weather events worldwide, and there has been flooding in Pakistan, Eastern Australia, in Sahel region, and also in Brazil and Venezuela. On the other hand, we have seen drought hitting Horn of Africa, Europe, China, Northern Africa, United States, Mexico, and also middle and southern part of South America. And this drought in Horn of Africa has been longest ever, and there's a food crisis which is hitting 20 million people there. Last summer, the heat wave here in Europe led to casualties of about 15,000 people who died because of the heat wave and poor air quality. And in China, last summer was the hottest summer ever, and it was also the second driest summer that they have observed. And they also reached a record low level of water in their main river called Yangtze. There was very severe flooding in Pakistan, which affected 30 million people, and there were 1,700 casualties and about $30 billion economic losses, and altogether 9% of the country was flooded. There was one severe hurricane hitting United States called Ian, which led to 152 casualties and economic losses of the order of $113 billion. We have started seeing cyclones hitting southeastern part of Africa, which is a new feature, and last spring we had 4 cyclones hitting Madagascar, which led to 214 casualties, and about 570,000 people were affected because of that event. We have seen a positive development in undernourishment during the past decade, but during recent years we have started seeing the increase of food insecurity again, and there have been more than 20 million people affected in Horn of Africa, 28 million in Latin America and Caribbean, 19 million in Afghanistan, and 7 million in South Sudan. And then we have seen also displacements because of these extreme weather events. 8 million people were forced to leave their homes in Pakistan, 1.1 million in Bangladesh, 1.2 million in Somalia, 500,000 in Ethiopia and 700,000 in Brazil due to these extreme weather events. That's in a nutshell the contents of the report, and now I will show the same story in slides. I have this kind of mathematical and physical education, and in our field we are supposed to prove our statements by showing facts, and now I will show them to you.
Vous pouvez activer le partage? Non, il est désactivé.
Okay, so this report was a joint venture of large amount of scientists. We had 50 scientists from 38 countries and also regional and global institutions, and there were 20 experts from 7 UN agencies and 98 members from WMO 6 regions who are behind this report. And as I said, we have seen this warming continued, but the last 3 years have been so-called La Niña years, which means that we haven't been breaking the all-time high, but the last 8 years have been the warmest period in record, and so far we have reached this 1.15 degrees warming. And we have broken records in 3 main greenhouse gas concentrations: carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide, and the annual increase of methane concentration last year was the highest we have recorded since 1980. And out of those, carbon dioxide is the most important one because of its very long lifetime, and it has contributed 2/3 of the warming, and it's very much coming from consumption of fossil fuels. Next, please. And then we have seen doubling of the sea level rise, and it used to be 2.3 millimeters per year in the past 20 years ago, and now we have seen 4.6 millimeters sea level rise during the recent years. And this sea level rise game we have already lost because we have already such a high concentration of carbon dioxide that the sea level rise and melting of glaciers, especially these major glaciers of Greenland and Antarctica, will continue even for the coming thousands of years. So that's bad news when it comes to future scenarios. Next, please. And ocean heat, we have been measuring the heat content at various depths in the ocean, and globally we have seen steady increase year by year, and this is giving more energy for the tropical storms, and it's also leading to evaporation of water vapor from the ocean, which is boosting the flooding, flash flood problems over the continents. Next, please. And cryosphere, this glacier melting has been boosting, and you can see that there has been fairly negative trend. We are losing more and more of glacier mass, which is going to be a long-term threat for availability of fresh water in main rivers in Asia, in Europe, in Central Asia, and North America and South America, where we have the biggest mountain glaciers. So this is one of the contributors to water challenge that we are facing. And as I said, we have started seeing new feature that also the Antarctic sea ice has started melting besides the classical Arctic sea ice melting, and this is a new feature, and it's also an indication of climate change. Next, please. And this La Niña, which is cooling the Pacific temperatures, has been persistent for 3 years already, and that's why we haven't been breaking the all-time global temperature records, but we have been breaking regional temperature records during last year. And this droughts and flooding, we have seen several flooding events in various parts of the world, and worst of those was the flooding in Pakistan, as I already mentioned. But we have also seen drought, and several of these drought events have been attached to heat waves, as was the case in China, in Europe, and also in North America, and also central and southern parts of South America. And in Europe we broke all-time highs, 40 degrees in UK, 37.2 degrees in Sweden, and also we broke regional records in Ireland and in northern part of Germany. And the 5 top impact events have been this drought in Horn of Africa. Could you go back to the previous one? Flooding in Pakistan, heat waves and drought both in Europe and China, and also this Hurricane Ian, which was hitting USA and Cuba. And this drought in Africa is a record-breaking one. We have never seen such a long drought there, and this has caused problems for food security, especially in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia, and it has been boosting the crisis in Somalia, which is a country under unrest also for other reasons. Next, please. And this flooding in Pakistan led to 1,700 deaths. 30 million people were affected, about 1/3 of the population of the country, and there were losses of the order of $30 billion, and 9% of the country was flooded. And these kind of events, they're becoming more frequent. We have started seeing more often these kind of stagnant weather conditions where the high pressure systems are sitting in the same place as was the case here in Europe and China, whereas the low pressure areas are moving along the same paths and leading to cases like we saw in Pakistan. And in Europe we got 15,000 casualties because of the heat waves, and we have seen such cases also in 2010 with 50,000 casualties, and 2003 with 75,000 casualties. So the heat waves are also having health implications. Next, please. And this heat wave in China was a record-breaking. It was half degree higher than any previous summer, and it was the second driest summer on record. And we were having lowest level of Yangtze River last August. And one very severe hurricane was hitting United States and Cuba, and that led to 214 casualties, and there were 570,000 people affected. That's actually that's Madagascar. So we have seen both Madagascar and United States hit by tropical storms. And what is unusual is this amount of cyclones hitting Madagascar, and that may be a consequence of the warming of the ocean. And the countries have reported various effects, and heat waves and drought have been the most common ones, and there have been also flooding events in the countries and various other disasters. I don't go to details here. Next. And finally, I would like to say that we have seen again increase of the food insecurity because of the impacts of climate change, and that's bad news, because this long-term trend was more or less positive, but something opposite has happened recently, and also these high-impact weather events, they have led to displacements worldwide. And good news is also what also the most recent IPCC report was demonstrating, that these climate-friendly energy solutions, their prices have been dropping, so it's nowadays more attractive to invest in wind and solar energy as compared to fossil energy, and also the prices of electric vehicles and batteries have been dropping, so we have better means to be successful in climate mitigation than in the past. And finally, WMO has new initiatives for the future. One of our major initiatives is early warning services for all, which Secretary General Guterres gave us a mandate to prepare a year ago, and now we are going to the implementation phase where we invest in basic observing systems, in early warning service capacities of the countries, and also delivery of the new services for various customers and users like emergency management authorities, local farmers, energy authorities, aviation and marine transportation authorities, and various businesses in the countries. And this is a powerful way to adapt to climate change. Nowadays, only half of our members have proper early warning services in place, and that's why they are having more casualties and also more economic losses attached to these high-impact weather events. That's all from my side, and now I'm open for your questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Professor Taalas. So the floor is now open for questions. In the room first, please raise your hand, give your name and the name of your media, and I will give you the floor. Anyone in the room? No one in the room, so we will start with Yuri.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the briefing. My name is Yuri Akolev. I'm the correspondent of RIA Novosti in Geneva. What are the WMO's forecasts for Russia, and in particular with regard to permafrost in Siberia? Thank you.
Thank you. So these Arctic areas are warming the most globally, and we have seen shrinking of the ice cover in the Arctic and also shrinking of the snow cover in the region, and the warming has been more than double the global average because of this positive feedback caused by melting of snow and ice, and we have started seeing also melting of the permafrost, which has caused problems for infrastructures, for buildings, for roads, for various infrastructures, also these oil and gas pipelines and railroads, which are built on permafrost, and the melting of permafrost means that we are going to see more, potentially more emissions of carbon dioxide and methane from those regions. And this is one of the risks that we have to follow. But so far, we haven't seen major emissions of carbon dioxide nor methane coming from the melting permafrost. But the potential is there, and that's an issue that we have to follow. And this kind of additional burst of methane and carbon dioxide from those regions would, of course, boost already high concentrations of carbon dioxide and also methane. But it's a challenge in Russia. It's a challenge in northern Canada and also in Alaska, where many infrastructures are built on permafrost.
Thank you. We have a question from Seth Borenstein from AP. I read it, we received it by email. How would you compare 2022 to other recent years of extreme weather? Was it one of the worst? And how does it compare to what we will get in 10 to 20 years as the world is warming further?
So we have seen this negative trend in weather patterns continued, and it was a bit unusual to see these heat waves hitting many important areas in northern hemisphere, and all of the indicators, they were negative, and the record that we broke was, for example, this annual increase of methane methane concentration. And unfortunately, this negative trend in weather patterns and all of these parameters may continue until 2060s, independent of our success in climate mitigation. We have already emitted so much of especially carbon dioxide to the atmosphere that this kind of phasing out of the negative trend takes several decades. And as I said, we have already lost this melting of glaciers game and sea level rise game. So that's bad news. And according to IPCC, the conservative estimate of sea level rise is 0.5 meter to 1 meter per century. But there are some studies published by NASA, for example, where they estimate that there's a potential for speedier melting of Antarctic glacier once water intrudes under the glacier, and that would, in the worst case, lead to up to 10 meters of sea level rise by 2300, and that would be, of course, a major disaster worldwide because many of the big cities and population densities, they're very high in the coastal areas, and of course we have island states and low-lying states like Netherlands and Bangladesh, which would face this more, but that would be a global disaster, and again it should be and could be one of the motivators of more ambitious means to mitigate climate change.
Thank you. Jérémy Lange, Radio France.
I can't think of a report more gloomy than this one, even if we know some of those figures since the last IPCC report. It's nothing new. But I was wondering, you mentioned at the beginning that you had some good news, though, but it seems that the fact that we have more renewable energy and the costs that are dropping is a bit short. So I was wondering, I mean, is there any more good news than just this one? And the second question is should we forget about the word unusual when we talk about climate change? Now that we know that this thing is happening every year now, we have new records every month, every year. So should we forget the word unusual when we have to talk about climate change?
So the good news is, at least from my perspective, I have been following this climate issue since early 80s when I studied meteorology, and then climate change was a top secret thing in the meteorological community, and then we started publishing IPCC reports in 1990, and there was first no reaction to those reports, and 10 years later there were attacks against science where the facts were questioned. And what has happened during the past 10 years is that the governments have realized that there's a problem called climate change, and they can see it with their own eyes, and the proof of scientific facts is now very clear. And what has also been happening during the past years is that the private sector has started acting. So growing amount of big companies worldwide, they are interested in climate mitigation and being part of the solution, and then we have also growing technological means to be successful in climate mitigation. So there's also reason to be slightly optimistic, and during the past 15 years 32 countries have reduced their emissions, whereas their economies have been growing at the same time. It's mostly European countries, but also United States, Japan and Singapore, for example, have done so. And at the moment, there's a growth in build-up of renewable energy, solar, wind. We have also new nuclear energy solutions coming on the market, and most car manufacturers have started manufacturing electric vehicles, and actually many have already said that they will stop production of fossil fuel based vehicles. So we have growing amount of means to be successful in climate mitigation, but we have to speed up our action to be successful in reaching the Paris 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees targets. And of course, for media, it's maybe a little bit frustrating that we are breaking these records year by year, and of course we are moving in the wrong direction. And this is of course historically unusual, and these record breakings that I was just mentioning, they are also unusual. But of course the audience have heard about those already, but it's important to repeat the message and motivate governments and private sector actors and also us consumers to speed up our climate-friendly action.
The second part of the question, did you answer to it?
Whether this is unusual or not.
Okay.
That's sort of what I tried at least.
Christian Ulrich?
Thank you, Brigitte. Professor, can you enlighten us on what the latest research is on El Niño coming? What are your latest predictions? And maybe you can explain a bit El Niño and the changing wind streams in the atmosphere. And I wonder, when you say, irrespective of what we do in the next decades, this trend is going on until the 2060s. How can we not despair? Thank you.
Thank you. First, about this El Niño, La Niña variability, which is a natural feature. So these temperatures of the Pacific Ocean vary year by year, and the last 3 years have been so-called La Niña years, and that's why there has been this cooling effect. And these El Niño, La Niña are also affecting the global weather patterns, especially at the low latitudes. And at the moment we are going towards El Niño neutral phase, and the forecast is that we are heading towards El Niño during the latter part of this year, and dependent on how long this El Niño phase will last, we may again break our temperature records next year if this El Niño persists the whole next year. And we have already had previous estimates that there's 50% chance that we could hit the low limit of Paris Agreement 1.5 on temporary basis attached to next El Niño.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, this press conference will come to an end. The press, there is, Christian again?
Sorry, I was just hoping that we get some words of encouragement. How can we not despair with this prospect that the trend is going on until the 60s? Thank you.
Thank you. So that's going to happen anyhow, and the good news would be that we would be able to phase out this negative trend and even reach the 1.5 degrees limit. And good news is that already the richest countries, G7 countries and European Union have fairly ambitious climate mitigation plans, and of course European Union has been one of the drivers, and at the moment the current US government is also preparing fairly ambitious climate programs. So these climate-friendly solutions will become mainstream. I'm quite confident of that. And of course the key issue is what happens with the remaining so-called G20 countries, excluding G7 countries. Altogether G20 countries are responsible for 80% of the global emissions, and it's very important that we get countries like China, India, Brazil, South Africa, Russia on board these more ambitious climate policies. And one should keep in mind that, for example, India and China as countries will will also suffer heavily if we fail with the climate mitigation. These low-lying areas that they're having, their dependence on Himalayan glacier water, and their exposure to typhoons and cyclones, and also the fact that they are suffering because of poor air quality. They are all indicators that it should be and could be motivating for those countries to also join this ambitious climate-friendly club. And also this climate-friendly technology is a business opportunity for example, for China. China has already become market leader of the solar and wind technology, and also there's going to be growing market for these electric vehicles and also many other climate-friendly technologies. So it's also a great opportunity. So there's not the reason to be totally pessimistic, but unfortunately we will see growing negative impacts of the climate change during the coming decades.
Thank you. Two more questions have come up. Lisa Schlein.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Lisa Schlein, Voice of America. I'd like to know whether the richer countries are living up to their promises to help the developing countries, which are contributing the least to the climate problem that we're having, and yet they are suffering the most. And you have outlined some of this in your presentation regarding the droughts and the floods, etc., which have hit these parts of the world. So wherein does the optimism lie as far as those countries are concerned? And of course, if it's not helped there, it's not helped anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. As part of this Paris Agreement, we have this mechanism to finance climate activities, climate mitigation, and also growingly climate adaptation activities in poorer countries, and the promise is that there should be 100 billion financing on an annual basis, and so far we have been able to reach about 80 billion a year level, and there were promises in Sharm el-Sheikh that we would reach this 100 billion a year investment level next year. So that let's hope that happens, and of course the absolute biggest losses are felt in richest countries like United States, but once you divide the losses with the sizes of the economy, the relative biggest losses are felt in less developed countries, and we have this loss and damage discussion going on, whether the rich countries should pay for the damage that the climate is causing in poorer countries, and the smartest way is to avoid those losses, and one powerful way to avoid those losses is to invest in early warning services, and that's why WMO and a few other United Nations agencies are having this early warning services for all program to enhance the early warning service skills and preparedness of the countries to face a growing amount of weather-related disasters. And that program is now ongoing, and the aim is that by the end of 2027 we would reach 100% coverage of proper early warning services. And optimism, of course, the coming decades are going to be decades with negative trends, but if we would be able to reach the Paris 1.5, that would be the best for the welfare of mankind and biosphere, and also for global economy, and also with 2 degrees we would see less damage than as compared to 3 degrees. The most recent IPCC report was demonstrating what kind of damages we could see if we would reach these higher numbers, and I think that message should be carefully read and understood, and that's why we should enhance our climate mitigation efforts.
Thank you. One last question from Emma Farge, Reuters.
Thank you. It was about Switzerland, actually. I'm wondering if you think Switzerland's doing enough on climate change. And I had in mind the fact that they're paying poorer nations to cut emissions on their behalf. And also I had in mind the fact that there's a new climate law being voted on in June. Thanks.
Yeah, in Switzerland, what happened last summer is that we lost 6.2% of the glacier mass, which is the biggest loss so far, and this is again striking that with these heat waves, it's not only a matter of temperature, but it's also affecting our availability to get water resources to major rivers, and also it's affecting also the hydropower capacity of the countries. And many countries have prepared climate laws, and with those laws we are typically committing several future governments to proceed with the climate mitigation efforts, and that's most welcome development, because in democratic countries we have seen variation between government and government in their ambition level of climate mitigation, and this kind of laws would ensure longer-term commitments, and that's sometimes a challenge in democratic countries.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions this time, we will come to an end with this press conference. Just to inform you that the press release is published in all 6 UN languages, and it's available from our website and from the press release you received. Thank you very much. If you have more questions or you want to organize interviews, please reach out to Claire Nulis, our media officer, and have a good end of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.